Well, I think Patriot Desmond Patriot Fowobi is on the line with us, president of the Nigerian Nexus. A very good morning to you, Patriot. Thank you so much for availing yourself for this discourse as usual on Morning Express.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Bito. Good morning, Shijuke. It's wonderful being with you this morning to discuss issue that concerns us.
Well, once again, Dangote Refinery is in the news. This time around, it's not with Nupeng. Rather, it is with Pengasin, a feud that the federal government is trying to wade in to intervene. Now, Pengasin is, as well as TUC, are both threatening a nationwide strike over Dangote Refinery's sack of about 800 tanker drivers in the country. What do you make of this constant and consistent feud between the refinery and these labor unions in the oil and gas industry?
Thank you, Shijuke, for this question. The crisis that we have seen, either from Pengasin or Nupeng over the last few weeks, between Dangote and other subsidiaries of our oil sector, is actually envisaged. It is envisaged because if you go back, you will realize that our own economy is mono economy. That a lot of lifestyle, a lot of people depend on these petrol and petrol businesses, and a lot of people are tied to this petrol sector, this fuel sector, oil sector. And Dangote, being a private organization, you will know that because it's a private organization and it's a big conglomerate that is bringing about is tankers, drivers, and every other areas of this business, you would expect that you will certainly have crisis with some players in the field. But I am also very certain that just the moment of shake and balance, after now, I'm very there would be a more cordial, more understanding environment for Dangote to play and for every other independent or every other private sub business owner connecting with the oil sector would eventually find a balance and resolve some of these crises. But personally, I'm certain and I'm sure that this crisis is just like every other crisis because our people are conservative, and Dangote being a private entity would mess with a lot of existing protocol or orders, and it is those orders that are fighting back now. With the intervention from the federal government, I am sure that they will eventually find a melting pot.
Well, ahead of that meeting, which the federal government has convened, inviting Pegasin and Dangote, the other pressing issue at hand is the provisions of labor laws. Pegasin is the largest oil and gas workers' union in the country, as against Dangote, who is the biggest, largest single train in Africa. Now, the provisions of the allegations on ground is over the alleged sack of 800 workers, replacing them with 2,000 Indians, as was captured in Comrade Festus of Sifo's statement at a World Press Conference here in Abuja. What do you make of the dealings based on this labor laws as allegedly contravened by Dangote and the mass sack of workers?
We need to wait to that was the press conference, by the umpire that is managing the affairs of unionism and trade union and affairs and all of that. We will need to wait for Dangote to give a counter or to give a clarification to that claim. The reason is because that figure is really high. You cannot replace 800 and something people with about Indians. So I know that these allegations are weighty and heavy, and we are expecting Dangote to come out to either accept or disregard this claim. But to speak to the facts, if this is certainly the situation that I think that Dangote have some quick answers to give to Nigerians, because you cannot, under what circumstances and what could be the reason for the sack of your indigents, your citizens, that the reason why you have the peace you enjoy today is because of the PI, the Petroleum Industrial Act, the laws, and the labor laws that says that you must put into consideration employment of aboriginals, especially in the countries, in the host countries, in the host environment where you have this business. So I do not see any rationale. I do not see any acceptance to the 2,000 machineries from India or from China or from anywhere in the world. So, but we need to wait for Dangote to clarify those facts.
Now, one of the most recent interviews granted by Dangote, who was speaking on the need to expand investments in Nigeria in particular, saw him applaud the quality of engineers who worked to bring the refinery on board, saying that after their contract was completed, a lot of them were being scouted by international oil firms, that he wished there were more investors in Nigeria to create job opportunities for the likes of such engineers. What does this speak to? Because it's easy to point fingers at Dangote, since he's probably the only one who has brazenly taken on the need to fill the void in the midstream sector. What happens to a lot of Nigerians with this know-how, which he cited, who are now probably out of job since the coming on board phase of the refinery is long gone?
You know, I have always been a proponent and propounder of the fact that we need to give the right skills to our people. Nigeria, if there is nothing Nigeria can boast of in the world, is our population, the largest black nation in the world. And then if you look at that population, about 65 to 70% of that population is youth-centered, youth population. What it means is that there is no machineries, there is no expertise that you want to create out of Indians, out of Chinese, that you can create out of Nigeria, if only we do the needful. Dangote did not start the concept or the idea of a refinery last year or 2 years. These are enough time to also look at training our young people, giving our youth the right skills. Nigeria we are here in Nigeria crying of unemployment. We are crying. We've been complaining in this country of unemployment. And I think I'm not only throwing shade at Dangote, but also to every stakeholder, including the state, the local, and the federal government. We expect that with the notice that Dangote is going to have refineries here, we should anticipate the number of experts that you will be needing, the number of other staffs that you're going to be needing, and then providing, working hand in hand with, that is intentional. That is only if our government are intentional. By government, I mean the local government, the state government, and the federal government, and every other relevant stakeholder in providing the appropriate skills needed to function very well at Dangote refineries. Now, beyond talking about providing skills, another thing is the welfare. No sane Nigeria, no sane expert would want to leave Nigeria's environment in search of greener pasture in another man's land. It is necessity. Most of the trips you see, most of our experts that are leaving this country, is not that they are not patriotic enough, but that maybe the laws, the labor laws needs to what? Needs to improve on the welfare of our workers. You find out that it is not only petroleum workers that travel out, oil workers that travel out of this country in search of greener pasture in other foreign countries. We also have nurses, we have doctors, and we have other professionals, most skilled professionals that live in this
all right, duly noted. Let's come to the second subject on discuss this morning, and it's ahead of a meeting which the federal government is going to convene today to more or less resolve this dispute. But as it stands, one of the newspapers earlier put a projection on how much would be lost daily should the industrial action commence, and it's way over 14.7 billion naira daily if this is left unresolved. What does this speak to in terms of the proactiveness of the government and the need to halt this ongoing feud?
That is where government needs to show responsibility. Dangote is a private company. It may not be Dangote. It could have been Indians. It could have been Chinese. It could have been any investor that is actually managing or manning the petroleum or the Dangote, the single bed refinery in this country. And that is why government needs to look at, there are certain proactiveness I expected. There are certain laws, there are certain principles and guidelines that you need to have. Why are we having these conflicts? Why is Dangote having issues? What does our constitution say? What does the law say? Is anyone contravening the law? Who is at fault? Is it Pengasin? Is this from the sub-workers of petroleum in the country that are now being affected by Dangote refineries that is at fault? Or it is the government, it is the Dangote refinery itself that is at fault? And that is where the issue of proactiveness needs to come in. We can't be having this conflict around Dangote. Last time it was last week or 2 weeks ago, it was Nupeng. Now it is Penderson. Who is going to be next? This threat can be curbed. This threat can be resolved. This crisis we're having among these private sectors and entities in this country can be resolved if only the government is proactive enough. Being proactive is not for calling for conflict, for mediating conflict among these parties. It's about putting in place laws, principles, guidelines that governs the affairs of private investors and the aboriginals and some of the stakeholders in that sector in the country. Until that is done, we'll still be going this front and back. Today it is oil sector, tomorrow it could be something else. It could be textile industry tomorrow, it could be technology, it could be information technology. So because oil sector is a big deal in Nigeria, and that is why we are seeing some of these conflicts. There are so many other sectors that we need government to be more proactive. All these reforms that is going on, tax reforms, we need industrial reforms. We need to start planning for the future, and until that is done, we'll still be going this front and back. But like you said, 14 billion daily is a big deal, and it's going to affect our economy. It's going to affect our population. So all I'm asking, beyond providing immediate medicine or solution to the crisis in our oil sector, is about looking at our industries, looking at all our sectors, all our businesses, and government needs to have committees or people in charge, experts that can foresee the future and put in place the right measures to prevent conflicts among private sectors and stakeholders in that sector.
Quite rightly put, Patriot Desmond. A lot of Nigerians are opposing this particular move by Pengasin to embark on a nationwide strike. And they are, on the other hand, applauding Dangote Refinery for standing its ground against the likes of Nupeng, against the likes of Pengasin in this case, and even the TUC, stating that these labor unions have done more harm than good to the industry that they are supposed to be, unionizing for and ensuring that they work together for the growth and development of these industries. Is this, while calling for this labor reforms to labor laws, should we also ensure that the federal government in itself holds these labor unions accountable so that they don't continue to disrupt a system that is only trying to bring, some sort of succor to the sufferings of Nigerians in terms of the pricing of petroleum products? The Dangote Refinery has been there and has been doing quite a lot of good for the oil and gas industry. Nigerians are applauding the refinery, and here you have these labor unions attacking the business left, right, and center every now and then.
Well, if you ask me, I don't think the federal government um, have much to do if our laws does not actually guide or provide direction on what should be implemented. Otherwise, it will amount to what they call arbitrary use of power. For me, I've already talked about the solution. You know, the laws actually permitted some of these labor unions. If you look at chapter 4 of our constitution, has defined the chapter 4 of our constitution has defined how different association union can come together, have their own bylaw and all that. He has given them power. So some of the excesses that they have is what is playing out right now that is creating those conflicts. It is those things that our laws need to correct. Yes, there is freedom of in association. You have the right to come together in our constitution. But the constitution should be definite in defining their rights, their powers, so that it will not always contend with other businesses and affect life. Dangote have the right to do what it's doing right now. So also Nupeng, Pengerson, and other unions. They have the right. And until we look at, we set up a committee that can look at these businesses and how this union affects private. Before, initially, this union, you see, this association, they came up together to fight government. They came to actually be like a shaker to some of the appointees of government in some of this sector in the olden days, before now. But things are changing, times are changing. Businesses in Nigeria are not so owned the way it was before by government. Private sectors are now setting in, changing the old game. So our laws, some of our laws need to be proactive enough to address some of the crises that can emanate from these independent bodies that stand ab initio against government or arbitrary use of power by appointees of government.
All right,
now we are talking about private sector.
All right, I quite agree with you, because even the adage on the street is where your right ends, that's where another person's right begins. But in keeping with the last time Dangote had any issues with any union, it took the Department of State Services to broker a truce, because they felt it was going to be a case of national security disrupting fuel supply. Now, this brings us to our third item on discuss this moment. Beyond disruptions in the fuel supply chain are possibilities to disrupt electricity supply. There's an impending blackout looming should this strike go on. And this is because about 70% of the electricity enjoyed in homes and businesses are supplied through thermal powered plants as against hydroelectric power plants. It's even a bigger concern for our unstable national grid. Is this also another case of national security? Will the DSS be joining the federal government, Pegasan and Dangote at this meeting, in your opinion? Or what should be the step taken to avert another looming crisis when it comes to electricity supply?
First is this primary problem of the threat of industrial action by Pegasan, which the federal government, like I read from the news this morning, the federal government has called for a meeting to resolve any kind of crisis that may be between Pegasan and Dangote and other sector. This is the first thing, truce, that the federal government needs to broker between Pegasan and Dangote. Beyond that, is institutional. Some of the problems, like I was trying to say earlier, is institutional. Federal government needs to go beyond this recurrent intervention in crisis and finding a permanent solution, laws that guides the activities of these unions and private sector in the country. And then on the issue of electricity, I tell you, there is little or nothing we can do until we actually look for other source of generating power. in as much as power depends on national grid and this traditional gas turbine and other things. It is now an opportunity, this crisis is now an opportunity for us to look inwardly and find a better or a solution to generating electricity that cannot be hindered by human factor. And yeah, I'm talking about maybe we look at solar energy, we look at we have a lot of coal in Enugu and all that. We can start looking at other means of generating power. And that is the only way. Otherwise, the laws that guides our actions and labor in this country needs to be repealed or improved to accommodate or entertain some of the new challenges.
Patriot Desmond, the average Nigerian listening to us this morning will be wondering, in the oil and gas industry, there is a brewing crisis. There is about to be a possible hike in the price of petroleum products as alleged by local oil marketers, as well as this possibility of a strike that could also cripple the sector. And on the other hand, we have the possibility of a nationwide blackout. Already, the Federal Ministry of Power had already envisaged some sort of blackout before this particular issue. And now we have the Pengas and Dangote war that is about to lead to the shutdown of thermal power plants in the country. I believe the average Nigerian will be wondering, where do they run to at this point? The oil and gas sector is in shambles. The power sector is also nothing to write home about. What is the way out?
Yes, thank you so much, Chijuki. While you were talking, I was just looking at some of the problems we have had here in the country. For many years, we are, as a country, let me be frank, we are not proactive in finding solutions to our problems. Look at the refineries. We have refineries. Suddenly, Dangote has become a big deal. A country of over 220 million people, a country with enormous human and natural resources, a country where we have professors, we have over 200 and something universities, research institute over 110, and then we are depending only on, we are now scared because of the actions or the inactions of one particular person or a company, though a major player. You see, we need to go back to drawing board. Why are Nigerians no longer holding the federal government accountable for the inactiveness of our refineries? What happens to Warri Refinery? What is the future of Kaduna Refinery? What is the federal government saying about Onel Refinery? What about what effort is federal government making in ensuring that almost all the states where we have oil in this country have modular refineries, which would also help to resolve some of these conflicts. Like I told you, the reason why there is a lot of crisis in our oil sector is because the role Dangote Refinery is playing. And then these conflicts are envisaged, they are envisioned to come out. That is the reason why there has to be check and balances. There has to be what? You can't have a monopoly. Nigeria is too big for you to have a monopoly. Dangote is enjoying that feed at the moment. And that is where you need to call on the federal government to reduce the pressure on Dangote or resolve some of the arbitrariness within Dangote, if that is the case.
Now away from Dangote.
By creating your own solution. The only way you can create a solution is to ensure that our refineries are perfectly working.
Now, away from Dangote, let's talk about a solution as proposed by the government with the signing into law of the Electricity Act. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has now given states the power to generate and distribute their own power. But the challenge with that is even in terms of the cabals perceived within the electricity sector, be it at transmission or even with the GENCOs. a number of states have faced a lot of pushback for trying to implement the Electricity Act. How do we get it right in Nigeria? It's not as though there are no solutions or the government is not creating the enabling laws to bring about the much needed change.
And what efforts is federal government putting into it beyond signing the law?
But if you have the laws, one would think that since some states already have plans.
No, I'm talking about the Petroleum Act, Electricity
Act.
Bill.
Yeah.
Act. What do you think will give the state governors the motivation to embark on those gigantic projects? You know that a lot of governors today, they are just interested in some. If you go to states, federal government, you have to give kudos to federal government. It's only federal government that looks like they have direction, they have plans. And the reason is because of the number of stakeholders that is involved in running the country. But the case is different if you go to states. You imagine some states distributing shovel, wheelbarrow as empowerment, state governors, embarking on gutter projects like small projects like clearing gutters. Is it?
And these are ordinarily, Patriot Desmond, these are ordinarily projects that should be handled by either local government council chairman or even councillors.
The state government, that's what I'm saying. State government, now, most states I've been to different states, I now see state governors, state government embarking on projects that ordinarily should be handled by a councillor. Now, where is the connection? Where is the energy?
That is where I'm driving to. How about the information? How about the information?
Why are you so much energy on irrelevant things as a government? Say, is it when you focus your energy and attention on petty projects, you will now think of creating your own power or generating your own power as a state government? And that's where I want the federal government beyond the act, beyond passing into law, the act that empowers state government to generate. What is the motivation or deterrent?
Now that being said, we all agree.
Our laws, let me tell you, Nigerians are not demanding enough accountability from government. And our law, I don't know if Nigeria can be innovative in creating laws that would give the citizens the power to check people in government beyond recall. The only power the citizens of the Federation of Nigeria have to check the elected executives is recalling them. But looking at the practicability of this law, do you think it's possible to recall any elected officers?
Now, away from these issues as it affects power, energy security is a debate that's been ongoing, and be it at COP29, COP30, these are pertinent issues that come up. Now, the other one that continues to hit close to home is food security. This morning, the Vanguard had an editorial as to concerns with the use of toxic substances either to preserve or process food. Over time, we've given NAFDAC the much needed causes as a regulator to ensure that this sector is free from all these challenges. But when you look at a lead headline on a Monday that talks about toxic harvest, hazardous pesticides harm food production, exports, what does this bring to mind, Patriot Desmond?
This particular issue is a very serious issue because it's a question of our security, food security, and in this context, it is not food security in terms of shortage, but the safety of the food that we are eating. You see, because even some of our governments have been, they've been accused of importing as palliative, hazardous foods for the people, and because of the scarcity of food and all that. That's where the Ministry of Agriculture need to step up their game in terms of educating farmers. on the right procedures in securing our food. Securing our food means the process of growing food, the type of fertilizer being used, and the kind of procedures they adopt in safeguarding this food. So it's all about awareness. It's all about education, because some people feel that without using some of these pesticides, without using some of these procedures that they are used to because of lack of education or enough information or awareness of the danger of their practices, how it can affect our lives. So the Ministry of Education, sorry, the Ministry of Agriculture, NAFDAC, and other sisters agencies surrounding our food and agriculture needs to step up their game in terms of educating, and government must be ready to provide subsidy or provide incentives for the actualization of ensuring that our farmers practice safe farming, safe storage, and handling of some of this food. It is a question of sensitization.
Patriot Desmond, when you talk about sensitization, in what sense? What can the federal government possibly teach the farmer who has probably been farming all his life, probably from childhood into adulthood? Is this a case of perhaps the federal government just giving out seedlings or fertilizers, or in this case, pesticides to these farmers, or rather a more in-depth collaboration between these farmers who are already hands-on with this agricultural knowledge, and then the federal government that has the resources to provide what the farmer actually needs? Shouldn't this knowledge be coming from the farmer rather than the federal government?
No. If you look at our country, if you look at the agricultural sector, you find out the Ministry of Agriculture actually have a cordial relationship with the farmers.
Exactly.
I have seen in different states in this country where there has been stakeholders engagement, where there have been sensitization, even in educating farmers on new seedlings, new method of growing, and that is a continuous something. It's part of a recurrence. It's in our recurrence. The Ministry of Agriculture, beyond what you see in Abuja, have people, personnel, experts, and research institutions that research on improvement of particular seedling and how to handle it, and they have a network, they have that system. The federal government, Ministry of Agriculture, and the farmer in Nigeria, they have this relationship and a system of interrelating and interacting or educating them, or even providing incentives, subsidies, and palliative to farmers. They have that established system. It is to plug into those systems now in correcting some of these handlings. And let me also say this. Let me say this. You know that before now, we think that some of these farmers you see, they still practice old kind of farming. It is lie. They no longer. Most of the farmers you see today, the method of farming today is contemporary, highly contemporary. Where did they get those information from? From symposium, from the education sector.
Hello, Patriot Desmond. Well, I believe there's a slight glitch in the network there, and he's talking about the need to educate farmers more to curb the harmful practices of using pesticides in harvest, which in turn poison the harvest and can also lead to more or less bigger challenges with the health of those who consume this. My next question to him was on value addition, because if value addition across the agricultural sector is implemented, most farmers would not be tempted to use these harmful pesticides in a bid to preserve their harvest, particularly when you look at vegetables. Let's take tomatoes and pepper, for instance. Whilst a lot of them coming from the north, before you transport them all down to the markets in the southwest, southeast, where you have huge demands for them, you'd find most of them decaying. A number of farmers have come out to grant interviews on how much losses that they have incurred over time. And whilst the challenge now rests with the government on if they have the enabling storage facilities or could better stand in the gap, these are concerns that continue to greet our everyday discourse.
Well, certainly, Bito. And Patriot Desmond was rather saying something about mechanized farming, about a more modern style of farming, and that some of this information or some of this technical knowledge were gotten from symposiums outside of Nigeria or from seminars that government officials, perhaps from the Federal Ministry of Agriculture, have attended outside the shores of the country. But I think that it just gets to a point where the average Nigerian farmer starts to lose faith or trust, rather, in the system. It starts to lose trust in in the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and even the federal government. Yes, it's important to provide these farmers with fertilizers. It's important to provide them with seedlings, which have been very controversial, by the way. We'll still come back to the topic of GMOs in just a moment. It's also important to provide them with pesticides. However, when you have fertilizers that weaken the soil, when you have GMOs that are not what we are used to, and could also potentially harm the soil on which these farmers farm and harvest their crops, and you also have pesticides, in this case in the news, pesticides that are harmful both to the crops and also to human health. It raises a lot of questions as to the transparency of the materials or the products that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture is bringing into the country and sharing to these farmers. Yes, these farmers have been the farming method of Nigerians. The local farming method has been there for time immemorial, and it's important to understand that while we want to adopt new mechanized ways of farming, we should also not entirely negate the importance of the old school style of farming that has been, known for ages. We hear that Patriot Desmond is back on the line. Patriot, welcome back to the program. You were
Yeah.
you were expressing yourself right before the internet yanked you off.
Yes. I was only saying that what I was trying to say, because I could hear your conversation while I came on board, while I was connected. I overheard you when you talked about that the traditional or the old style of farming, the traditional way that we farm, that you cannot suddenly change that. But let me tell you, the old way that our parents farm is even safer. Some of the manure, some of the fertilizer used are natural. And that's why there's a lot of wastage, even in their processing and storage. It is natural. They have their natural method of doing this kind of thing. Since the introduction of contemporary farming, mechanized farming, a lot of things were also introduced. Any hazard you're talking about today, any pesticide you're seeing today, are not traditional. They're not part of the old fashion or old ways of planning or farming or storing farm produce. It is this new method. And that's why I'm saying that if you go to some villages today, some people still prefer to go get their food from those old farmers, because they consider that those old farmers and those farmers who farm traditionally save their foods, are safe, and the rest of them. So what I'm only trying to say is that the federal government, two other agencies and state government, collaboration with state government, can track these farms and correct. It's just about awareness. They have the network, they have the contacts, they can actually educate them. Some of these farmers, it is what is available that they are using. So if federal government can also cut the inflow of some of these dangerous or hazardous materials or equipment used in our farming, that will also go a long way, in solving this food hazard.
Now, Patriot Desmond, there are more technical issues coming on board, and I quite agree with you when you say there's need for more enlightenment. On the one hand, there's the issue of antimicrobial resistance, because some of the pesticides used now contain certain antibiotics some farmers use to, in their own way, make their livestock even more, more, how they call it, appealing in the market in increasing size. But the downside to it is, when you consume it as a human being and you come down with any illness, when you go to get treatment, you don't respond to treatment because you had consumed this unknowingly by eating such livestock. When it comes to more technical things like antimicrobial resistance and the GMOs in the conversation, are you sure that Nigerian farmers are better equipped for these discussions?
Interestingly, the challenge now is not about the safety of the food, but it's the availability of the food. You see, there are some Nigerians that even when they have all the information about some of the danger or risk involved in eating certain food, they still go ahead to eat those food because of hunger. You see, there is a level of food security that you get to, then we now start looking at the safety of the food. I'm not disregarding this topic, but the truth is that there are some people who even go as far as food that are meant to be destroyed by customs, NAFTA. They go back to steal them, wrestle with government and agencies of government to rescue this food and eat them because of the level of hunger. Why this is a fact? You see, it is when you have life, when you are not hopeless. And that is why I am supporting President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on this renewed hope mantra and mandate. Because a lot of people before he came on board are hopeless. And in that situation where you have hopeless Nigeria, you can't be talking about what do you call it?
Antimicrobial resistance, AMR.
Microbial resistance. Who cares? A lot of Nigerians don't care. All Nigerians want at that time is just to get food and eat. But it will eventually get better. Just like in the country today, when you are living, not surviving like many Nigerians are doing now, you know, if you go to the market, these food are labeled. Foods that are organic, they are more expensive. Food that are not unorganic, that are not organic, are less expensive. It's all about improving the quality and restoring the hope of the people, like President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has promised. Otherwise, this technicality you are talking about, who cares? Do you know that sometimes, even to rescue hunger, federal government and some state government, they've imported some food that some citizens describe as substandard. So what are you saying?
Well, Patriot Desmond, a fine place to leave the discussion this morning. We must thank you so much. It's been wonderful having this dialogue with you on Morning Express.
The pleasure is over.
Thank you.